The description of the tragedy in this video is remarkable to a psychologist and a psychiatrist. There is a almost complete absence of emotion. So if this is an attempt to try and persuade the world of their innocence, it may be quite flawed psychologically.
Batool, along with Urfan Sharif and Faisal Malik, are coming forward and presenting ourselves. Sara's death was an incident.
One of the questions I think many people will be asking on the release of this video from the father of Sara Sharif and her stepmother is, why did they do it? What's the motivation here? This is a very high-stakes situation. We know from the past, to do with videos released when hostages have been taken, or Osama bin Laden has released not dissimilar kinds of videos in the past, that it very much increases the chances that people will be caught and found through tracing back where the video was made and the links with how the video got released and how it ended up in the hands of news agencies. So given the risks involved, why do it? The number one motivation most people will be thinking is that it's an attempt to declare their innocence. However, from a psychological standpoint, this seems rather strange because the way the video is shot, the very strong associations in our minds with examples like Osama bin Laden shooting similar kinds of video with a similar attempt to disguise the background, kind of heavily associates the whole thing with guilt. So if this is an attempt to try and persuade the world of their innocence, it may be quite flawed psychologically. We know that when these kinds of videos are released and there is a manhunt on for the people who've made the video, we know that psychologists, for example, hired by the CIA, will be analysing the video. And they'll be analysing the video to try and figure out what's going on here. Now, when you've got a possible crime, we don't know for certain there has been a crime, where a child may have been harmed or may even have been killed, one of the key questions is, what is the relationship between the two parental figures? This is important for all sorts of reasons. If a crime is going to be uncovered, usually what's required is one of the two parental figures, if this is a child abuse case or a child harm case, has to break ranks and confess and tell on the other. So the bond between these two people becomes incredibly important in terms of trying to figure out how the crime, if there is a crime, might be uncovered. The body language of the two people in this video is therefore very interesting. They don't really seem to look at each other. They sit quite far away from each other. They don't seem to touch each other. They look very estranged. Psychologists working for organizations like the CIA will be interpreting that as telling us something about their relationship. Maybe the relationship is strained given they're on the run. Maybe there's a strain because they don't agree with what they're doing. Maybe there's a strain because one person believes the other has harmed the child and is requiring one person to keep stum, to keep quiet. And maybe there's a strain, they're not happy with that collaboration. So one key thing many forensic psychologists will be looking at in the video is, does the body language tell us something about the nature of the relationship between these two parental figures? The other reason why the relationship between the two parental figures is important, and maybe something can be deduced about it from the video, is that sometimes child abuse occurs when there is conflict between the two parental figures. Sometimes the conflict and the stress and the anger that arises out of the conflict means that the anger and the upset is taken out on the child. It's a major predictor of child abuse and child harm. So that's another reason why the body language between these two people, and whether they appear close, and they don't appear close in this video, would be being analysed by forensic psychologists. The basic setup of this video is the father remains silent throughout the video, which is very curious. Why is he in the video at all then, if his only contribution is to look quite menacing to some people, or sullen or upset, but to remain silent? The other person talks, the stepmother talks, but she's reading what she's saying. She's not saying it directly to camera. Again, many people would be thinking, why is she doing that? Is she reading something that's been written for her? Therefore, these are not her own words. Is she in a coercive and controlling relationship? Does the reading out of the statement reveal that? These are some of the questions that psychologists will be thinking about when they think about the fact one person is speaking and the other isn't. Obviously, there's some more ordinary or mundane answers. Maybe the father is not very good with English. Maybe it's not his first language. Maybe the mother, or the stepmother in this particular case, is more articulate. But there is a real question, if a couple agree to make a video, why one remains silent and the other speaks. Is the fact that the father is there a signal that he's checking to make sure that the mother reads out what she's meant to say? Is it a signal of what is commonly referred to now as a coercive and controlling relationship, and is often found in child abuse cases? Obviously, we can't be certain about any of these things, but it's the kind of thing when a manhunt is on, when a crime is being investigated, that forensic psychologists and psychiatrists will be thinking about when they analyse this video. The other thing to think about with this video, given both parties in the video look very uncomfortable and don't look like they really want to be there, is actually, was this their idea at all? Maybe they've been told to make the video. Maybe people around them have said, we'll only keep you in hiding, we'll only cover for you, we'll only continue to hide you from the authorities, given the risk it represents to us, if you make a video and declare your innocence. So maybe they're forced to make the video by a third party. That is another aspect of this video that forensic psychologists will be thinking about as they attempt to analyse what's really going on here psychologically. The description of the tragedy in this video, and by some other family members who've been interviewed elsewhere, is remarkable to a psychologist and a psychiatrist. We're discussing a tragedy where a child has died and a crime is being investigated. Has the child been killed? In this situation, you expect to see people very upset, if they're the parents and they were close to the child, just referring to the death of the child. There is a complete, almost complete, absence of emotion, which to some psychologists might be quite telling. Because if there's an absence of emotion, maybe there was an absence of attachment, and sometimes child harm occurs in those circumstances. We can't be certain of any of this, of course, but it's the kind of thing people will be thinking about when they analyse the video. It is striking, the lack of emotion, when people refer in the video to what happened to the child. They use the word incident.
Sara's death was an incident.
They don't use the word tragedy, for example. The other interesting thing to a psychologist is that as they refer to the incident, they remain somewhat cold, somewhat absent emotionally. Just referring to the death, given how recent it is, one would expect people to look upset, or appear upset, or be upset, and they seem somewhat indifferent. The very use of the word incident is strikingly symbolic and significant psychologically, because it's a strange word to use when someone has died that you're very close to. One of the possible psychological reasons why this video has been shot and has been disseminated to news agencies is that the parents in this situation, the stepmother and the father, fled the United Kingdom very shortly after what appears to be the death of the child. The deaths were then discovered afterwards. So there's a real question in any dispassionate observer's mind: why are they fleeing? Is the fleeing a sign of guilt? And clearly it might well be. However, it might well be still the case that the parents, the stepmother and the father, are innocent of harming the child, but they fled in panic, worried that they would be accused and worried about their ability to maintain their innocence. That's another possibility. Often people flee in panic and only later reflect on the fact that the fleeing itself added to the impression of guilt. It is believed to be the case that this father and stepmother are travelling with other children. Given a crime is being investigated where a child may have been killed and may have been harmed beforehand, given the injuries it is reported the child appears to have suffered. It looks like these injuries may have occurred over a period of time, which is some of the speculation that's occurred in the press. Then it would be very worrying that this pair, this parental couple, the father and the stepmother, may be travelling with other children. There will be a natural sense in which the authorities will be very worried about the fate of these children and how safe they are. The other thing that's very worrying is if they are travelling with these children, why did the pair not comment on this? Why did they not provide reassurance? Why did they not say, we want everyone to know these children are fine and they're safe? There is something about the lack of an ability to think about what observers would be thinking when they watch the video that is very striking about the way this pair made the video. If they fled the UK in panic and are very anxious and are spinning around making decisions in a state of heightened anxiety and not thinking clearly, maybe the video was made in a state of panic. Maybe the video itself is something they now actually regret. When a child has died and people around that child are grieving, when they speak about the child, they reminisce. It's a natural human tendency to say something about the child, to say something that you were very attached to. The child had a lovely smile. It's a natural human tendency to reminisce because it's your way of processing the grief. It's your way of bringing back the child into your mind and into your head, and it's part of the process of not letting go, and working through that is the process of letting go. There is something quite remarkable in this video that there are no reminiscences about the child. There is nothing that indicates these two parental figures miss this child in any way. That doesn't, of course, mean that they are guilty. The crime, if there is a crime, still has to be properly investigated, but it's the kind of thing that a forensic psychologist would be concerned about as they analyse this video. It is striking that Olga, the biological mother of this child, gave an interview which is strikingly different in emotional tone. She was very, very upset, inconsolable, and spoke about the child in a deeply emotional manner, which indicates something about obviously her attachment and the loss that she is suffering. It is striking to contrast and compare the emotional reaction you got from the biological mother from these other two parental figures, the stepmother and the father, who seem remarkably cold and dispassionate and removed emotionally as they talk about the same incident. There already appears to be a gathering dispute between different accounts of what happened to this child and how they may have sustained injuries and how they might have met their end. There are different versions of events, and this is being contested. And this is to be expected, perhaps in a situation where a crime has occurred and people are maybe trying to cover up that crime. Obviously, even if a crime has not occurred and someone did fall down the stairs and that's how they met their end, we don't know, it's still a natural psychological thing for the original mother, who's no longer living with the child, to feel guilty about the fact she wasn't there to protect this child, and that is another reason why she might point the finger, though we don't know what's really happened here, at the idea that actually something terrible has happened to the child. The psychological sense of guilt of not being there when the child was with these other parental figures that she may be suspicious about may lead her to make accusations when we don't know for certain whether the evidence stacks up one way or the other. One other possible reason for making this video goes back to something that's said in the content. It does look as though these people are claiming that they're afraid for their own lives and that they're worried that the authorities in Pakistan or other figures in Pakistan may cause them harm as a result of this incident. So they seem very worried about this. Maybe one reason for making the video is about getting national and international attention. That's a way of protecting themselves. They believe that now they're in the newspaper headlines, it's less likely that figures in Pakistan will come after them because it will be national and international news. making the video may have been an act of personal protection.